is WZRD Chicago, 88.3 FM. And we have with us at WZRD via Zoom, Rob Dixon, tenor saxophone player. Good afternoon, Rob. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. How are you? It's good to be on this with you.
Hello, Rob.
Hi.
I
Hello.
think you might be mute. Let's see. Oh, hang on. Whoops. Here we go. Hello, Rob.
Hey, hello. Can you
Hello.
hear me?
Yes, very, very well. First of all,
Excellent.
Rob, yes, excellent. So glad to have you with us on WZRD. First of all, Rob, let's begin at the beginning. What made you fall in love with the saxophone?
I think when I was in grade school, um, um, a band came to our school for like a convocation, and I fell in love with them. They were playing instrumental, well, they were playing jazz, and so really great jazz band, and that kind of got me hooked on wanting to play music. So I decided then I was like, I'm going to play an instrument. And so next year I signed up for band and I was in the ensemble and started off wanting to play drums, but saxophone was my second choice because I had too many drummers. And then here we are today. Still
The rest is
saxophone.
history. But when
Yes.
you played in an ensemble, how old were you at the time? How did you learn to read music?
Oh, and well, taking concert band like in fifth grade. I
Mhm.
think was my first, and then you start out as in concert band, reading music. So, um, a lot of horn players, I think we're at an advantage, um, to a lot of other instrumentalists just because we kind of started out playing like in grade school, like reading music. Um, so it's kind of comes with the territory of like, playing either saxophone or trumpet or trombone, that you would read music. So yeah, I got started around fifth grade, and that was when I started.
Were there any influences in your family?
No, no family influences. Nobody in my family played music, but my sister was wanting to play the piano and the guitar, and um, it was funny. She ended up. My parents got her a piano, and she never touched it, and um, I ended up getting, sitting at the piano and uh, playing, um, and actually getting pretty good at just playing chords and making up songs. So I want to thank my sister for having interest but not following through.
But how did you learn to play songs? I write songs. Did you hear them in your head? Did you want to do variations on the songs you love? How old were you at the time when you started writing your own songs?
I started writing, it's funny. I when I was in band in fifth grade, I think I started out by, going home, not only playing the music in concert band, but like learning how to try to listen to the radio or at the time it was the radio and they had jazz stations and I would listen to the songs, the instrumental, and try to play those songs on my saxophone and then sit at the piano and maybe try to figure out the chords to a song. And so that got me into just making up my own like set of chord changes and coming up with other melodies. And I, started writing at an early age. And I don't think I was very good at it, but I kept writing, working on it, um, to get better and learning more chords and um, yeah. So that was the kind of the spark just by listening to radio, trying to make those sounds on my saxophone, and trying to make those chords on the piano that actually sent me on exploring the composing side of music.
Did you get the saxophone? Did your family buy it for you, or did the school provide it?
No, my family bought it for me, and the first saxophone they got me, it looked so old and beat up, I didn't want to play it, but um, so then they went and got me another one that looked newer. But I think probably looking back, probably the one that was beat up was probably the a vintage horn worth a lot of money. I don't even know, but because now this horn I play is not pretty. But it's a vintage horn, so I love it.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, my parents got me, and I had expressed an interest in playing drums, and so they were like, "Well, if you do well on the saxophone, we'll think about getting you a drum set." And a year later, they got me a drum set because I was just way into the music.
Wow.
Yeah,
So, so you play the piano, you play drums, and you play saxophone. What else?
that's it. I mean, I dabble with some of the doubles, but I'm not really particularly that great with flute and clarinet,
Mm.
uh, just a little bit. So. And I play all the saxophone, of course, alto, soprano, tenor, baritone saxophone.
What I don't understand about saxophone, of course, there are the different voices like tenor and
Mhm.
all that. But does that correlate with like a vocalist? How what determines if a player is going to be a tenor or another voice?
Oh, yeah. So with saxophone, you can just pick whatever you want to do. Like if you want to be an alto saxophonist or a tenor or a baritone or play soprano, it doesn't have to do with the timbre or of your voice or the range of your voice quality. It's just whatever you decide to play. But that being said, saxophone is the sound of the saxophone is very closely related to the voice. I think it's probably one of the most the instruments, musical instruments that is that's as that's very closely related to the voice. So um, early on, a lot of saxophonists mimic um, singers, and I think to this day, like some saxophonists do that, and because of that quality of the saxophone being so close to the voice, the human voice.
Mm. So
Mhm.
when you train for a voice, you have to be very careful of preserving your voice. Since you love to play so much, is there any point when you play too much and it might hurt you?
Um, no, I do get fatigued. It's a little more forgiving than like playing a brass instrument, saxophone. You can play for hours, but like I say, if I'm doing a performance, I like to keep it to uh, under an hour and a half because I just get physically tired of standing and playing for an hour and a half straight. It's a lot of
Mm.
um, but yeah. I can play. There were times I practiced for hours. So, um, saxophone is kind of forgiving. You don't have to. It's not gonna be completely too hard on your chops, because you're blowing and it's not as much back pressure as like say a trumpet or a trombone.
Mm. So, so that's the difference between a brass instrument. A brass instrument is like a trombone, a clarinet. What?
Oh, brass instrument is like a trumpet or a trombone or a tuba, and it's kind of really hard on your embouchure. It's like, so I think with those instruments, like if I play trumpet, you'd want to probably take breaks regularly because it wears on your muscles on your face and on your
Mm.
lips. Hmm.
Oh, oh. But you're still using the breath, right, from the diaphragm for all
Yes,
these
so
wind
yeah,
instruments?
absolutely, absolutely. You're still using the breath. It's just kind of the same mechanics. Um, it's just probably not as much back pressure, and it's probably not as much pressure on your embouchure.
Oh.
So makes it a little easier.
Mhm. Did you have any mentors in the beginning? What just it's so you're just like 5 years old and you decide that you want to play. You
Hmm.
listened to jazz and then you loved it and that inspired you, or were there a lot of your fellow classmates that thought like you?
Yeah, so I did. I listened to music and I really liked it. And I think um, when I was about maybe 13 or 14, I got in a jazz band and we were playing a Spyro Gyra song. And I started studying with a teacher who was a great saxophonist and a great clarinetist. Um, and I took him the song by Spyro Gyra. And just by looking at the chord changes, he sounded better than the guy on the record, than Jay Beckinsale. I was like, I mean,
Hmm.
because this guy could like kind of was like a disciple of Cannonball Adderley because he could play like Cannonball, and he uh, he just sounded amazing. And I was like, how does he do that? Just by looking at the chords. And then so I was just really uh, kind of fascinated. And he told me, hey, check out this record, check out Cannonball Adderley, something else, check out Miles Davis, Kind of Blue, check out. He sent me on the right path of what records to start out listening to, and then I was just hooked ever since then.
In other words, he showed you the classics that you really need to know that are like the backbone of.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
yes.
So what did you practice every day? How did it consume your life?
No, it wasn't like every day. I mean, I practiced, I had just a strong interest in music. So I would play with bands outside of school, and didn't know that I was going to pursue it professionally um, until I got to college, and I just kept playing, and got more interested in playing with groups, and I said, well, maybe I want to do this for a living. So I became like more serious when I got to around that age.
Did any players give you some advice about uh, how is it enough to is playing a saxophone enough to make a living to get by?
Nobody told me about I always heard that, that old saying, do what you love and you don't have to worry about the money. Well, that's not always the case, right? You can do what you love and not make money. But I felt like, if I put my best foot forward in music, that things would just turn out okay. Um, and I just have a love of it. So I think that was the money part wasn't really something I thought about when I pursued the music industry.
How did you what was your big first break? Who how did you hook up with somebody that was uh, a big name?
Sure. Was in New York. I had moved to New York, and this was in the late '90s, and I was going out to a lot of jam sessions, and a guy by the name of Craig Bailey asked me to sub for him at a place called Dean Street, and I did that night, and then a guy walked up to me, and his name was Weldon Irving, great piano composer, wrote the song Mr. Clean, wrote Young Gifted and Black for Nina Simone. He said, do you want to be a part of a pit orchestra at the Billie Holiday Center in Brooklyn? We're doing a play. And I was like, yeah, sure. And so that I showed up. I didn't actually think he was serious, but he called me the next morning, and I went to the Billie Holiday theater, and he had me play for him, and said he didn't have a part for me, but if I made my own part up to the play, then I could be in it, and ended up making a weekly salary, and that kind of kept me in New York, and that was my first really big break. Weldon Irving gave me my first big break, and then outside of that, maybe like 6 months, maybe 8 months later, I think um, a friend of mine told me that Illinois Jacquet was looking for a tenor player in his band, and I joined that band. I went over his house Monday and I auditioned for him, and I think I was on the road with him Thursday. We flew out to Amsterdam and did a European tour. So that was kind of my first official going out on tour group. It was with the great, late great saxophonist Illinois Jacquet.
Weldon Irving, you said that he asked you to create your own part. What does that mean?
So there was no written part in the play, in the music for the play. It was a play called Raising Hell, and it was a musical adaptation of the music from Smokey Robinson. Um, so Smokey Robinson came out and saw the show a few times. So they didn't have a saxophone part. So he said, "Can you make up a part to the music?" And so I made up a part. But with it being a play and theater, I realized it had to be the same part. I had to play so I had to make up something that I would play the same way every night, like I was writing it, like a music, like a score for myself. Um, and so I played the same thing every night to the songs, kind of like either riffs or melodies. And one night it was funny. One night it was a big packed house, and I thought, man, I'm going to go for a high note just because the energy in the rooms just feels so good. And so I think I played a higher note on my instrument at the end of the play, and it felt amazing. And then like that next like day, I got called to the producer's office saying that I played some wrong notes. And I was like, okay, oh, I say, and then it dawned on me, oh, I gotta play it exactly like the same way every time, you know.
Mhm. Wow.
So yeah. But that was a great experience getting to work with Weldon. And I mean, he just was had such a wealth of knowledge about music and just life in general. So I really cherish that relationship that I had with him.
Wow. And how old were you at the time?
I was probably like 25, 24, 25 or 26.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just starting out, but like getting your feet really wet that time.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It was he opened a lot of doors for me.
What is the most difficult part of about playing a saxophone?
Saxophone is not completely once you get used to it. I think for me the most challenging thing is always keeping up on my reads, because if I have a great read, it feels amazing to play. If I have a bad read, it doesn't feel good to play. And just you have to buy them, and every read is different. So sometimes you get really good reads, and just the maintenance on keeping like a good read selection. That's
Hmm.
probably one of the more challenging things for me at this point.
How long does a reed last? Are they made of like wicker, bamboo? What is it made of?
Yeah, it's made of cane from like bamboo, so um, um, it's wood, and it is it lasts about, I don't know. For me, it lasts about 2.5 weeks. You
Mm.
can make them last 3 months, but for me, I play a lot, and um, um, yeah. So, and they're very expensive. So,
So when a reed wears out, what happens to it?
um, it's um, and it just feels dead. It doesn't vibrate as much. The
Oh.
cane, the the reed comes from a cane plant, and so like when uh when the reed wears out, it vibrates less.
Mm.
Yeah,
Wow.
so
It seems as if you're saying that the wall of the reed, maybe all that pressure on it, it makes it kind of like turn flat. The wall structure.
yeah, I think, honestly, I think what it happens is like um the more you use to read, the more saliva gets in there, and then some
Hmm.
bacteria gets in there, and then it doesn't vibrate to the same part as it does initially, when you first get it. So you can clean it, but but then the enzymes in the cane break down.
Mm.
So then yeah, this just makes it less vibrant, makes it a little more dull.
So are they they're not factory made, they must be handmade each one, right? The reed?
No, they're factory made from they take the cane and cut it, and they have a factory that cuts it to a certain spec, and then it's maybe finished off by like hand cut in the finishing.
Wow.
Yeah, so
And so you have a whole set of them, and then maybe do you use them uh the appropriate one for every occasion, or do you just use one at a time?
yeah, I usually use, if I find a good read, I'll use one for like the entire life of that read, you know. I don't like to
Mm,
change.
mm,
Um, because if I find a good one, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna use this until it wears out.
mm,
And that's what I usually do. I don't switch. Some saxophonists switch reeds to, they'll rotate reeds to keep, to keep some of them fresh, but not me. I'll just use one.
mm. What about
Yeah.
teaching? You're also a teacher as well. How did you decide to teach?
Um, I was living in New York at the time, and actually just trying to get gigs, and there was a place that opened just recently called the Jazz Standard when I first went there, and so I got to know the owner, and I got to know the guy that booked, the guy that booked the music in the restaurant, very well. And I was playing in the upstairs restaurant, and so I was always pitching, saying, "Hey, let me do a gig, get a week at the Standard." And they were like, "Well, we book national artists, and artists with national names, so we can't really give you a gig just yet." But they always had me on the radar, and then they started a school program, and they said, we're going to, bust the kids from all five boroughs to the jazz club, and we want people to do educational programs. So I was one of the four or five groups that they used, and they really liked what I did. I guess, when I started doing it, and that's kind of my introduction into education. And then it got so, I think I was the favorite of the club that they actually had me on New York One as a featured educational, like, uh, you know, uh, band, to give convocations to schools.
Mm,
And I did a small interview with the lady or person on New York One, and then the John Schreiber group actually saw that, and asked me to be a part of Harmon How to Listen for that year. So then that turned into a really good gig where I got to go to all five boroughs and take my group and perform and teach kids about melody and harmony and rhythm and all the things that they had in the Harmon How to Listen program packet. And that really got me, uh, that really, fine-tuned my skills on how to communicate music to young people and listeners, and just music education in general. That kind of led me in the path of music education.
so you weren't really trained as a teacher, but you were trained as a musician, and you were imparting your knowledge about being a musician to the kids.
Yeah, exactly. I was trained as a musician. I mean, went to school and grad school for music. So I didn't study to be a teacher. I just wanted to perform, but I think I was able to, you know, um, make the transition into teaching. Um, wasn't completely difficult, because I would just address what challenges I had as a young person, or what challenges I had comprehending music, and best ways to understand the mechanics of music. Um,
Mhm.
so
So
yeah, that's how I got started in music education.
when you started being a teacher, were you did you later become a better teacher, or were you always a gifted teacher and it was easy for you to teach?
No, I think when you start out at anything, you're not that great at it. So as good as I thought I was at the time, I probably wasn't that great. But I really was enthusiastic about it. So I think over the years, the more students you have, and the more challenges you have, and the more situations you deal with, you actually learn from those experiences, and that just helps you be a better teacher. So I think I'm a far better teacher than I was like 10 years ago or 15 years ago, or maybe even 5 years ago.
Mhm. Tell us a little bit about the Jazz Futures.
Yeah, okay. So the Jazz Futures is a group that I started with the Indianapolis Jazz Foundation, and um, took a lot of talented students across the state of Indiana to form like a jazz ensemble. And if they had like um, um, a very strong interest and talent for the music, and they were pretty advanced. Initially, I would have like the advanced jazz students in high school be a part of this group. And what I would do is I would have them perform as many places as I possibly could, at festivals or art fairs or even at restaurants, just so that they could get the experience of actually playing a lot, doing a lot of playing. Because, you know, learning in classrooms or learning in rehearsals is great, but actually getting a chance to perform is an education into itself, to perform particularly on a regular basis. So that was kind of the the focus of that program. And then as it developed, um, it became more curriculum based, where I would have students not so advanced be a part of the program, and kind of teach them about music, teach them how to improvise, or teach them the concept of improvisation or what it entails, you know, and teach them the form and the function of the instruments that they play, and the roles that they have in jazz small group settings and in big group settings and big band.
So your students
So
were
I did, yeah, go ahead.
no, so your students were proficient were playing different instruments, not only saxophone, but you were able to
Right.
teach all of them. Mhm.
Yes. A saxophonist, trumpeters, trombonists, pianists, drummers, um, um, mostly, yeah. And I've had a few. I had a exceptional student that was an oboe player, and um, I had one young person that played French horn in my group. So um, yeah, so I had some non-traditional jazz instruments in the ensemble as well.
So were they with the non-traditional jazz instruments, what happened to those students? Did they how did they work the instruments and what became of it?
You know, it works. I mean, the theory is the theory. It's all based on, harmony, improvisation. So, why their instrument might not lend itself to being is accessible to play a lot of the the jazz language. They still could get the concept of it, and um, and I don't know if any of those students, maybe some of my students went. I think maybe a quarter of my students went on to pursue music, but I think 3/4 of them are like, they're engineers or doctors or lawyers or I think just music education is a great stimulus for just education in general. So I think when you have people that are involved in music, that sets them up to be successful in life.
Mhm. Yes.
Particularly when you learn to play an instrument and learn about the music, and not only the mechanics of music, but the history and the culture that surrounds it.
Well, that applies to a lot of things because let's say the student learns to play the instrument and learns the culture behind that. And whatever field it is, it's still you have to know the basics and know the inner workings of whatever that subject might be. And
Right.
after learning like a foreign language, which would be music,
Hmm.
that applies to what the other field that the student is going to be entering.
Right. That's true. Very
What
much.
what about empathy. Did you feel that was there a lot of empathy involved when you were teaching your students?
Some, yeah, because you want to see them do well, and just when you play jazz in particular when you're young, um, it's hard to sound good just right off the bat. And I say that just by, when I played in concert band, um, if if you play the music and you study the music and rehearse it, you can get a concert band sounding pretty good. But just the fact that jazz, the beat is swung and based off of a triplet feel, um, eighth note. I mean, that is kind of a hard, very nuanced, sophisticated um, thing to achieve, to get a swing feel, to get um, on your instrument, playing eighth notes, whether you're reading music or whether you're trying to improvise. So initially, when you start to play jazz, musicians kind of play like eight dotted 8/16, and it kind of sounds ricky ticky or just up and down and up. But like getting on like a nice flow, just even getting that concept of playing a triplet feel on an eighth note is kind of a big hurdle. Um, and then there's some other, challenges to the music that require a bit of sophistication and nuance. So an ensemble might not sound as good as a concert classical ensemble initially. Um, so you have to be empathetic to that situation and just know that it's going to get better.
Mhm. So jazz is a language in and of itself, a little separate from the music, a lot separate from just the language of music then.
Yes. Yes. I mean, yes, there's a language of to improvisation, uh, most particularly that is kind of based off of, you know, um, that language that I talk about is mainly rooted like in what I would say like early bebop, and which kind of follows, um, traditional just tension resolution cadences and music based on like harmony. So it 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 works nice with a lot of chromaticism and a lot of enclosures. And I know I'm speaking music terms, but it kind of fits in as a blueprint uh, to work in all musical situations.
Mhm. What about the stage fright? Did you ever have stage fright? And do your students talk about stage fright?
Yes, being nervous, I remember playing my first solo in fifth grade. I played After the Ball Is Over, and I was nervous. I played that melody, practiced it in the mirror a bunch, and then got up in front of a lot of folks. But what I realized, being nervous and playing jazz was just not a great combination. Just because you have to access a lot of creativity, so you want to have to be kind of relaxed. So, and that's why in jazz education, I try to get my students to perform as much as possible because, um, you know, the best the best jazz is like when a person is able to totally express themselves through their creativity at the highest level. And to achieve that, you can't be nervous and jittery and like, oh, you want to be very relaxed, almost kind of like accessing a meditative state. So, getting kids to perform on a regular basis to get them really relaxed on stage and comfortable, so they can get to that level of expressing themselves um, at a very high level. That's kind of the goal.
And more they perform, the better they are. So the first time is hardest, but then you try to get them to perform as much as possible, is what you're saying.
Right. Because the first time they'll be nervous, and then second time you're nervous, and third time, then probably after about 10 times, you're not as nervous. And after 20 times, you're like, okay, I know this. And 30 times, and the more you do it, the more you're like, okay, I feel more at home. This is like, you want it to fit like an old, like performance to be like an old glove or an old shoe that you put on, when you step on the stage, you want that to feel like home.
Mhm.
And that's what I try to impress upon my students is you want the stage and you want the performance venue and the spotlight to be home where you're most comfortable. You know, I think some of our greatest performers in the history of music have been most comfortable when they take the stage and when they perform.
Mhm. Because it becomes part of them. They're just being their own musical self. It's like just not separating the self from the music anymore.
Right, exactly.
When you advise your students about business, do you when you teach them, do you teach any of the business side of music as well?
I do, not so much in a formal sense like I'm teaching a music business class, but I do try to impart some wisdom about what I've learned through the School of Hard Knocks.
Mhm.
Just, things, the pitfalls and just things that you do, like when you make a record or when you try to promote yourself or try to get gigs from a festival or, you know, publish your material or your songs, all of those things that I've learned through my life lessons. I'll definitely tell them about it, and then what I think is the best way to go about.
Mhm. Do you have any students that later work with you or hit it big afterwards?
I have students that are very talented, and I think that could definitely pursue this music if they wanted to be professional. But what was the second part of the question?
Uh, did any of them become very successful?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I've worked with some students that are, that are doing things. I mean, they're either studying at Juilliard or uh one of my students plays with that I work with plays with Babyface, saxophonist Brian Thompson. He tours the world with them.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've had some success stories of very uh, accomplished musicians now.
Mhm. And in the beginning, you went to New York. Was the New
Hmm
York scene at that time more vibrant than the Chicago jazz scene?
I don't know. There's a lot of questions. No, I mean, Chicago's got a great jazz scene. It's just and it always has. It's fantastic. New York is a little different. I mean, it's uh you get a lot of people from just around the world. Like that's what I think about. Like I just remember being in New York and not seeing like just great people from the United States, but like one of the best saxophonists from like the Czech Republic or the best saxophonist from like Berlin or the best trumpet player from you know Belgium or Brussels or the best alto saxophonist from Tokyo or you would find that in New York,
Oh,
because it just seemed like every musician that who's really felt like that they were the top of their game would move to New York, and so you got to see this kind of like who's who in the world or who wants to be, you know what I mean,
yes.
pursuing it in that level.
Well, that must have been very educational for you too, because that now you're observing musicians that from other countries, and then you see how they play differently.
Oh, absolutely. And you see, you can actually see where you are. It gives you it's a very great litmus test to where you are in the spectrum like where you are as a musician, as an instrumentalist, as a saxophonist, um, it's really, you should just get like a gauge on um, where you stand up and actually in the globe, being in New York. I felt like that.
Did you travel? What other countries did you travel to perform?
Um, well, I've been a lot of places. I've been to Europe a lot, probably more than any other place, like all over Europe, France, Belgium, Italy, Spain, Amsterdam, um, just all over Europe, Germany, uh, Czech Republic, um, and then I've been to Russia,
Mm.
I've been to Osaka, Japan, and Tokyo, and Australia, uh,
What is the
South
jazz scene?
America, and I just
Mm.
was in Africa this last summer, so
Oh.
in Ghana. So I've been pretty much everywhere except maybe Antarctica and the North Pole. I haven't been to the North Pole or Antarctica, and so, but I don't
Oh.
know if there's a lot of jazz going on there.
What is the jazz scene like in Ghana and also in Russia? Like,
So Ghana has got like a really great scene in Accra. They have some great musicians in Africa. They have a couple of great clubs. They have a club called Coltrane. And then they have a jazz club called Plus 233, which is amazing, which is the country code that I found out. Because I was like, Plus 233 club. And I was like, what is that? And I was like, oh, it's the country club code. Like when you want to dial out, you go, to that country plus 233. Like we dial to America, one is our country code plus one. Theirs is plus 233. So their jazz club is called that. Um,
mm,
yeah, and it's beautiful. And the musicians there are very hungry and they love, you know, you can tell they're really digging in deep, a lot of the jazz musicians. And in Russia, I felt like I was there in 2013, all over, and I really loved it. And I really got a great understanding of for how much people love American culture. Because I think at the time I was selling CDs, and I took as many CDs as I could possibly take, and we were there for like a month. I think I sold out of like 500 CDs within like 4 days.
wow.
Yeah, so then I tried to have some sent to me, but it just didn't work out. It got caught up in customs. But they love anything like American, blues, jazz,
Mm.
uh, rock and roll. It seemed like, yeah, it was easy to sell if it was from America. It was easy to sell in Russia.
What about the jazz musicians in Russia? Were there a lot of them?
There are a few. Yes. There are a few, and they're really good musicians. I mean, I think um, we'd work with Igor Bootman, and he's kind of like the biggest name in Russia. He's a saxophonist.
Mhm.
His brother, and there was a great piano player, Leonid Vinskevich, and his son Nicholas. We were on a double bill with them. Um, yeah, and their musicians over there are very accomplished. Um, yeah, it's and I think that everybody has a different, maybe a slightly different feel in countries and the way they play the music. Though I mean, there's definitely a little bit of difference, shade of difference, and the concept of like the way they feel time. So that was the only difference, I think.
Mhm. They're uh, are they a little bit more a stickler for the technical in Russia?
Um, Maybe I wouldn't say that, but maybe, um, yeah, the feel is maybe a little more straight eighth.
Mm.
The way they play eighth notes. I can't really, I couldn't really put my finger on it exactly, but Yeah. I think Americans have a great, like, I think nobody has a swing feel like American jazz musicians. I think that's, um, something that is part of our culture. It comes from New Orleans, of course,
Mhm,
the birthplace, but I think it's a cultural thing about the swung eighth note.
mhm,
And it actually comes from Africa, really. I mean, with the Afro-Cuban music and, the triplet feel, we're
mhm,
taking that and then transferring it to like eighth notes played on an instrument or a piano.
mhm. When you were teaching, somehow you came back to Indiana.
Right.
Were you born? You're originally from Indiana, right?
No, no. So
Oh,
I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. I grew
oh,
up there and I moved there and lived there until I was about 11 years old. That's where I first started playing music. And then I moved to Atlanta area. And I lived in Atlanta until I was 18 and then went to my undergrad at Hampton University in Virginia and then graduate school at Indiana University. And that's how I came to Indiana. I was in Bloomington. And so I was in grad school, and after I finished grad school, I lived in Indianapolis and kind of started my career um, in Indianapolis for like a couple years before I moved to New York. And so this was kind of where it all started, like with me playing like gigs was in Indianapolis. But I shortly moved to New York and then um, lived there for about 7.5 years and then moved back to Indianapolis.
hmm. Did you get any scholarship? That's a lot of schooling for music.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had a fellowship for grad school. Yes. So it was paid for because I don't think I would have wanted to pay for grad school. Yeah. And I feel like, that was a great education, but I really, when I moved to New York, it was kind of like the next level education, being a
Mhm,
chance to work with Weldon Irving and a chance to work with Illinois Jacquet and just watch him on stage night after night perform. It really gave me an appreciation for big band music. It gave me an appreciation for like older style music that I didn't listen to.
mhm,
It made me check out like some older recordings that I wasn't really hip to before I joined this band. And it made me a better, just a more complete musician.
mhm. Yeah, there's nothing like actual stage listening versus like book learning.
Oh yeah, Illinois, was one of the big legends, and became a star at age 18 with the Lionel Hampton band with Flying Home. So um, yeah, it was and watching all of his experience, all those years of experience, and when he took the stage and when he performed, it really uh, was a great just by observing him was a great way to learn how to conduct myself on stage, how to play, what to play, how to connect with the audience. He was so good at that. So,
Hmm. So was he your mentor over the years?
in a sense, I mean, you know, uh, I didn't think he liked me, but
Why not? What made you think that?
he was just mean. They called him the Beast. He was mean, and he would never give me a solo. So I sat in his section for years and didn't play solo. But then I remember him doing an interview with Time magazine, or it was a big magazine, and we were at the Norwalk Jazz Festival in Connecticut, and he pointed to me. He's like, saying talking about he wasn't that much when he came. Now he's a true professional. He's with me. I taught him that. And I was like, wow, okay. It's a backhanded compliment, but I took it because I was like, man, he's calling me a true professional and saying how good I was. And I was in my early 20s. I felt great. And Illinois Jacquet is telling me, telling a reporter that how good I was and how much I've improved. So, uh, It was yeah, that was a great experience just to learn from him.
So what were you playing that made him say that oh you've come a long way, you're so good now.
I think when he would just hear me improvise, like after eventually he let give me a solo on a blues, and then he would give me a solo on rhythm changes, and then he would just hear my development. Um, and actually, the first time he heard me solo, I just kind of fell on my face because we played 1 o'clock jump, and I was totally not hip to big band music at the time. And in the 1 o'clock jump, the piano player starts off playing a blues in F, and then when it goes right to the chart, the saxophone takes a solo, the first solo, it modulates to D flat. So I had no idea that it changed key. And so in the crowd for about 3,500 people, I played it F. I played a blues in F when it was in the key of D flat. So it didn't sound that great. So that was my inauguration into the Illinois Jacquet big band. So I could go nowhere but up after that.
What was his face like when you were playing? Do you still remember?
So that no, I just know that I didn't feel good about it. Um, I couldn't even, I don't even think I looked over his way because I was just like trying to figure out where I was in the music. But but it was a great lesson for me because it made
Mhm.
me work and practice that much harder. You know what I mean? So if I ever got the shot again to play a solo in the band, I was gonna be ready. I was just gonna be bring down the house, and so or just play good, or not bring down the house, but actually play something succinct and sounded great. So I really worked on my blues playing after that.
When you watch other new young players play, do you see yourself in their shoes, like what you were like during that time? Do you see something like that in the young players as well?
I do sometimes I do see like their enthusiasm and their interest for it. Some of these players now uh were are have more, I think, tools at their uh disposal. They have kids today have everything at their fingertips with their phones, and so their information that they're able to get is just they're able to get a lot quicker,
Mhm.
and as a result, they're able to probably digest it in a faster fashion. So um, yeah, so I'm kind of blown away by some of my students on how fast they digest. And it's like, the younger you get involved, the younger you get involved in something, it seems like the more you can make it a second nature part of your existence. So I really appreciate that.
What would be the youngest would you do you think that someone who would want to be a serious musician should start playing? You started in grade 5, so
Yeah,
uh,
I mean, you can start like I've known people started like 3, 4, 5 years old. If they just have the interest for it. Because it does require some discipline that you have to spend time, practicing, or figuring things out. Um, that's the one thing that is great about music, in a world that is so, um, instant gratification driven, is that with music, it can't be, you have to spend the time, you have to spend a long time figuring things out for it to be, to, to make yourself good. Things just don't happen overnight. Well, in a lot of different things, particularly with music, you have to spend some time sounding bad, and then you have to spend some time sounding pretty mediocre. Then you have to spend time sounding pretty okay, pretty good, and advanced. But the more time you put in, the better you'll get. Yeah.
what about when you write songs? Do you actually write them down, or do you just keep on playing them and then until they feel right?
So, the way I write is like I sit at a piano and some songs that I'll just come up with the melodies, um, you know, um, by rote, just in my ear. But then I'll transfer that onto, paper and I'll notate it and write a piano chart or write a saxophone chart. So I'll chart it out and then I'll have it. But usually I try to experiment if I have a set of chord changes with the melody, to fine tune the melody before I chart it out. That's usually my process. So I will learn it, like, just play it by rote, learn it and like just teach myself a particular melody. And then once I dial it in, then I'll chart it out.
Do you still find yourself discovering a new chord combinations?
No, not so much different chord combinations. I mean, because it's 12 notes, so it's a very finite situation. But maybe just the approaches to um, the textures, um, um, maybe the way a chord may be voiced, um, you know, um, but not necessarily the set of chord changes. Um,
What do you mean the way a chord is voiced?
so in music, like a piano player sit and have a certain like play the root in the bottom of one hand and then the third in one hand, and I mean one finger, and the fifth in one finger and maybe the ninth. But maybe if it's voiced differently, he'll play the ninth on the bottom and the seventh in the middle and the third on the top. You
Mm.
know, yeah, just mixing up where the root of the chord and the extensions are placed. You know.
And that makes a difference in the tonal quality in the expression, right? Just
Oh,
that little
absolutely,
difference.
because you'll have what you hear on top is kind of the sound that you hear first is, so if you hear the root or if you hear a higher extension on top, it gives it just a different effect on the ear, on the sound of the chord. So
When you teach your students, what is your advice to them when they when what is your best advice to students, would you say? And how old would your students have to be before they really appreciate your advice?
um I think, students from all ages appreciate it. I tell my students, I think the biggest thing that I tell them is to listen to as much music as they possibly can. And if they want to play jazz, that they have to listen. They have to listen, and then they have to listen more, because you want to get yourself inside the music and completely understand where it comes from to actually play the music. You know, um, if you don't listen, then what you're playing when you say you're playing jazz might not be jazz. It might sound sort of like jazz or maybe like a facsimile, but the more you listen and more you ingrain yourself into that music, the more you can, actually, um, you know, um, perform it and speak and play it in the truest sense. Listening to the press, the people that came before you. I think, but aside from just listening to jazz, I encourage my students to put their ear on like a lot of different music from around the world, because it just helps expand their universe. You know, it's kind of the same thing in listening to music as someone to read a lot of or reading a lot of books. I think that's a great education. You know, if you can't travel, which is probably the best education, you can't travel the world and go to all these countries and experience cultures, reading about them is the next best thing. So if you can't go hear music alive every place in the world, like putting your ear on the music and listening to a lot of different music, in particular, if you like jazz and you want to study jazz, listening to a lot of jazz, that's only going to make you a better musician and more informed.
I'm sure that you being such a like a widely read musician, you've heard a lot of foreign songs. Do you ever find yourself uh, thinking about how to turn a foreign song or something that is not jazz into jazz?
Yeah, I really like to do that, and I call it genre bending. You kind of bend jazz over to maybe West African music, or to Cuban music, or anything, any style of music, classical.
Mhm,
I think it's great to do that, to try to, because I think this, in the end, it's really just two kinds of music. It's good and bad, right? That's what Duke
mhm.
Ellington said.
Yes. Rob Dixon, if our listeners wanted to learn more about you, where should they go?
You can go to either all my social media pages. I don't have a website right now, so just my Facebook or Instagram or um, Reverb Nation page. You can just Google my name. And all those things will show up. I put a lot of information about where I'm playing on a regular basis out there. So
Well, it was so nice having a chat with you, Rob Dixon. Very much
yeah,
good luck to you, and maybe we'll talk again soon.
yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
This
Bye.
has been WZRD Chicago 88.3 FM. Thank you, Rob Dixon.
Thanks.